Okay, I'm going live early, 5 minutes early, because I want to make sure that this is working. It's hard to tell because the little preview is quite behind. But we'll see. I'm going to wait till 1 o'clock. And as soon as 1 o'clock hits, I'm going to start. By Jove. I'll clean my glasses off. Not that I really need them. And right now I'm just rambling until 1 o'clock. Hopefully this works. Hey, oh my gosh, it's Kelly. Hi. I love me some Kelly. Kelly's just a wonderful person. Maybe one of the most wonderful people. How are you, Kelly? It's almost 1 o'clock. Can you stand it? I have so much to talk about, which for anybody who knows me isn't surprised. I laugh at my own jokes. Capture moments. This is the very first time that I have ever done a YouTube live. I've done Facebook lives. I've done all sorts of lives. I've been on stage, television, film, whatever. But this is the first time I've ever done YouTube live. So, needless to say, fingers crossed that it works okay. Anyway, I'm still waiting 3 minutes. I wanted to... I'm good, Kelly. I mean, what can you say? We're still in the middle of chaos, and to be able to say that I'm okay, I think that's a pretty good thing right now. What about you? How are you? Is life treating you okay? I hope. Still 3 minutes, people. Here's something interesting. So, when you do a Facebook Live event, you just go live, and that's it. To do a YouTube Live event, you have to install all sorts of software and jump through so many hoops. It's crazy. And that's why the reasons why I started this a little early, so I could make sure that it was going to work, because I had no idea. So I'm using OBS tool you have to connect the streaming tool to... Hi, Colleen, how are you? Yeah, I know, there's a nasty delay. I don't know why. But, technology, it's our friend and our foe. What can you do? How are you, Colleen? In about 20 seconds, she'll hear that. And then she'll reply. And about 20 seconds after that, I'll see the reply. That's outstanding. And I have a really good connection. So, I think we know whose fault this is. But, it's actually nice because you can see the comments, and yeah, it's not so bad once you get the hang of it. I'm still waiting. Oh, 1 minute left. Woo! 1 minute. Looking good. So are you. I can't see you. I can see your comments. So, and I'm going to kick this off. I'm going to embarrass myself. Me too. I need a vacation very badly. I'm going to start this off by embarrassing myself, just so everybody knows, just so everybody's prepared for this. I had this great opening. I was just going to start it and do this, but then I thought, I better do some testing first. So, and who knows who else will show up. But hey, 2 very important people in my life are here, and that's what matters, right? Yes, it does. And unfortunately, 2 of you, or whoever's here, you may have heard some of these stories before. I don't know. If so, I apologize, but I do tend to ramble on, and I don't remember what I've rambled to certain people. So, anyway, here we go. Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome. Fremder, étranger, stranger. Glücklich zu sehen, je suis enchanté. Happy to see you, bleibe, reste, stay. Hi Hi everybody, my name is Jack Wallen and I'm here on YouTube Live to talk about my book, Defying Gravity. Now, I'm not just going to talk about the book because you can read the description of the book on Amazon or wherever else you might buy it. I want to talk about what went into making this book because there was so much to it. And I think that the story of the creation of this book and everything that went into it is something that every artist should hear, because we have all experienced what I experienced to get to where I was, that I could write this book. I know that's a big buildup. But the thing is that the seeds of this book were planted so many years ago. And we're going to go back in time. And I'm going to sort of lay out all of those different moments in my life. And most of those moments, I believe, every one of you will be able to relate to on some level. So what we're going to do is we're first going to go back in time, back in the 80s, around the time when Doc Brown created the DeLorean, or the time machine that was built on the DeLorean, to when I was in high school. Yeah, I'm old. Back when I was a sophomore in high school, my plan was to be a marine biologist. I was in the upper 1% in the country in biology in my graduating class. And my biology teacher was dead set on me going to college and studying biology. And I was too, because I loved it. But then, as they say, the best laid plans, Murphy's Law and Occam's razor got together and really tripped up my plans. I was in speech class, and one day the speech teacher said, or he assigned us all to read a poem in front of class. Me being the kind of shenanigan-loving rebel that I was, I decided instead of reading a poem, I was going to read the lyrics from a Rush song, because Rush was and is my favorite band. And I stood up in front of the class and I read the lyrics to this Rush song, to everyone's delight, except the teacher. And the teacher made a deal with me. The teacher said, if you audition for the next school musical and you get cast, I will give you an A for the class. And I said, challenge accepted. I wasn't going to pass up that opportunity, right? Who wouldn't? So the next musical was called Babes in Arms, which was apropos, I think, for someone who had never done anything on stage, who had never sung before in front of an audience. And so I went to this audition. Now, here's a funny little sidebar. I sang, I can still remember this to this day, I sang On the Wings of Love as my audition piece. I sure did. So I walked into this audition, and as soon as I walked into the room, I immediately felt like these were my people. This was a room full of misfits, and I loved them, and they loved me, and they accepted me completely and utterly. And I auditioned for the show, and I got cast. I also just happened to get an A in speech class because of it. But in the process, I realized that I had no desire to study biology anymore. So after the show closed, I went to my biology teacher and I said, I've got some bad news for you. I'm going to go to college and I'm going to study theater. And that's what I did. I went to a small school in Indiana to get a BS, yeah, I know, a BS in theater and communications. And here's where the story gets all kind of tripped up and emotional. And it's also really where the first seed of this book got planted. So I went from being a medium fish in a medium pond in high school to a big fish in a small pond in undergraduate school. And with the exception of one show, I was in every show. I was cast in every show, and most often had leads in every show that I did. But the one thing is I adored musical theater. It's all I wanted to do. And it was very rare that the chairman of theater programmed a musical in the seasons. But he did once. And I did it. And after that show, I was planning on going to a graduate school that focused on musical theater. And the chairman of the department of that theater program looked me in the eye and he said, "You'll never do musicals." I was crushed. Absolutely and profoundly crushed. And so I changed my plans. Once again, I changed my plans. Instead of going to a graduate school that focused on musical theater, I changed course and I went to a graduate program that focused only on straight theater. So I went to Purdue University, and I don't regret that one bit. Because I met at Purdue University a man who would become instrumental in making me the artist who I am today. That man, his soul, is in the book, Defying Gravity, because of what he did for me. He was my movement teacher, and he made me realize something very important, that to become a great actor, more important than becoming a great actor, you must become a great artist. Because the process of acting encompasses so many other arts, so many other mediums, so many things. And you have to be an artist that is open to this sort of thing. And his teachings stuck with me to this day. I still hold him very dear. In fact, he stopped by this week on his way back home, and we had a little chat, and I actually autographed and gave him my very last copy, my very last paperback copy of Defying Gravity. I was going to use it as a prop for this little event here, but he needed to have that because he is in that book. So, right off the bat, I have this story where I knew that I had to overcome some major odds and obstacles in order for me to get where I wanted to go. And one of them was that chairman of theater always in the back of my head saying, "You'll never do musicals." So, I graduated from Purdue, and I went from theater to theater around the country. I did just about everything. I was on Broadway. I did American Players Theater, Colorado Shakespeare Festival, Milwaukee Chamber Theater, Phoenix Theater, you name it, I've done it. And then I ended up where I am now. And at some point in my career, I'm not going to go through this, but at some point in my career, I kind of transitioned my artistic endeavors to writing. But that doesn't mean I left the stage behind, because I didn't. I couldn't. I don't think any actor has ever succeeded in leaving the stage behind completely. And so every once in a while I get it in me and I have to do a show. Absolutely have to do a show. And 2 years ago, I had the absolute privilege of performing in Cabaret, which is one of my favorite musicals. Now, here's the thing. Even going into those auditions, I still had that man in my head saying, "You'll never do musicals." And I worked hours upon hours a day on that audition. And I cried, and I felt the crushing hand of impostor syndrome just reaching into my chest and grabbing my heart to say, "You'll never be able to do this." because I knew the competition was fierce and so many people wanted that role. I was one of them. And I wanted to prove that man wrong. Because if there's one thing about me, if you know me, there's one thing about me. I am tenacious. So I worked and I worked and I worked. Interesting thing is I worked on one song primarily, and that was I Don't Care Much, because I adore that song. I worked on that song every day. I would get all my writing done, and then I would wait till the house was empty, and then I would just work on it. And I would work until my voice was hoarse, and I would work until I was just weeping. And then there were other days when I would work on the song and I would feel just overcome by this sense of, oh my gosh, I can do this. I've got this. And so I go to the audition, and they don't have us sing that song. The first thing we had to do was we did Willkommen as a monologue. So people are doing their bit, and there's a thing in Willkommen where it says ad-lib. And that's the MC's turn to ad-lib about the various dancers. Well, Alan Cumming made it famous. Made it absolutely famous with his improvisations. And everybody at that audition used Cummings' improvisations. And then I got up and I made it my own. And while I was doing that, I watched the choreographer lean over to the director and whisper something in his ear. And it wasn't until after the show opened that the choreographer finally told me that what she said, she leaned over to the director and said, "That's your MC." And I got cast. And I remember I was in a production of Die Mommy Die, that was directed by the same director that was doing Cabaret. And he finally said, "I'm going to make you an offer to do the role of MC." And I lost it. Now, let's set that all aside, because that's going to come back to us in a moment. A lot of my books are inspired by dreams. A surprisingly large number of them are inspired by dreams. When a dream is so profound that it grips you so deeply that you can't let it go, to me, that is the universe telling me that I need to tell that story. One night, I dreamt that I was in a show, and during the rehearsal of that show, I was so overcome with joy that I started to fly. The mere act of performing, of creating something, filled me with such joy that I lifted off the ground. And if that's not a metaphor for something, I don't know what is. So when I woke up that morning, my initial thought was, that's a book. That's a story that I have got to tell, because it brings together so many of the things that I am passionate about in one place. Now, I had to set it aside because I was in the middle of writing. I had a contract to write some books for Devil Dog Press. And so I wasn't at a point in my life that I could actually start that book. So I wrote a paragraph in my to-be-written list, and I set it aside. And when it came time to actually write that book, I created the new file, and I realized what I was going to do was I was going to write that story, but I was going to use a musical of my own creation because of copyright laws and other things, because I thought, well, maybe I want to actually have lyrics in the book, and you can't do that with a copyrighted piece of material. So that's where I was going to go with that. Well, I wrote the first sentence in that book, and I stopped. And I said, no. I said, this has to be about cabaret. because I am still I'm still filled with passion about that production that I was in, and the musical itself. And I needed to use that as the foundation for this story. So I decided that cabaret would be the thing. And as soon as I realized that, the floodgates opened. And I was able to pull from the past and all of the things that brought me to where I am now. I was able to deal with imposter syndrome on a level that I was never able to deal with before, because I was writing this character, Will, who is me. It's the most autobiographical character I've ever written. I was able to write about him dealing with imposter syndrome, because it's exactly what happened to me. When I went into the first rehearsal of Cabaret and I heard the voices in that cast, my first thought was, I don't belong here. I don't have the chops for this. These are people these are stars. And I knew that I was going to have to work my butt off to get where I needed to be. And so I did. And the good news is that the musical became a huge success. It sold out the entire run. And people, after the show, people were just rushing me and gushing and hugging me and crying. And I remember the first night and the last night, opening night and closing night of the show, I was weeping. First night I was weeping because I did it. That I overcame that imposter syndrome. And the last night I was weeping because I was going to miss it so badly. So I knew I had all of that to draw on. And what was interesting about it was I was able to deal with imposter syndrome in a way that have never been able to deal with it. When I was writing that book, strangely enough, imposter syndrome could not have touched me. It could have manifested as a massive, horrific beast, come into my home, and I would have looked that thing in the eye and said, not today, not today. That's one of the reasons why this particular book is so meaningful to me. That for a brief period of time, while I was writing this book, there was no way imposter syndrome could touch me. Because not only was I remembering overcoming that massive hurdle in my artistic life that I did when I was in Cabaret, but I was also celebrating. I was celebrating a young man who was doing his first professional role, Will. I was also writing out the story of Will overcoming his own imposter syndrome. And then, of course, I was also able to bring in a bunch of other elements that I love, like the supernatural, like Colleen said. You know, there have been a number of times in my writing career where I have thought, you know, I probably should use a pseudonym and start writing romance, because romance sells. And then I start thinking, and I come up with an idea for a romance, and all of a sudden it gets weird. Because that's who I am as a writer. And I write what I love. And I don't think in my entire career I've ever loved with such a deep commitment that I did as when I wrote Defying Gravity. Because it's so personal to me. And I think it's also a book that every artist can relate to. And if you're an actor and you haven't been on stage for a while because of COVID or whatever, you can read this book and re-experience the joy and yes, the the trials and tribulations of performing, of rehearsing, not performing, of rehearsing, because this show really is, it starts from the first day of rehearsal and it goes all the way to the opening. And it takes a little bit of a sidetrack into the supernatural. I mean, think about it. I mean, this is magic realism. It's an actor discovering that he has this power. Actually, he discovers that the joy he gets from creating, from his craft, gives him this power. And I think, no, I firmly believe that as artists, when we are knee deep, when our fingers are deep in the pie of that artistic craft, that we do develop on some level a superpower. That we create something that is wholly unique. And in that moment of creation and performance, nothing can touch us. So, Defying Gravity was sort of my way to celebrate that. And it touches on things that I think especially every actor should understand. You know, it's one of the things that's always been very important to me as an actor is going in to the rehearsal and the performance process and not adding to the drama. My goal, and this is a little secret here for any actor that might be listening out there, and this is part of what my mentor from grad school imparted upon me, kind of without saying directly. But my goal when I go into a new show is that every single thing I do and say, be it on stage or off stage or backstage or in the rehearsal space, is with the idea that I want to make them want to hire me again. So I do everything, and I do everything I can for that. So I'm cordial, I'm nice, I work my butt off. I bring 110% every day. And generally speaking, I'll come to the first day of rehearsal almost completely off book for a show, just because that's who I am. And you know, I want to show them that I am dedicated to what I do. And I am dedicated to my books as well. To the craft of writing, I am wholly 100% dedicated to that as well. And I bring what I have, everything of who I am, to the table when I write. But anyway, the thing is that Defying Gravity is much more to me than just a book. To me, it's my life story in about a 70,000 word document. Now, the one thing that didn't happen in real life, there was no romance in the production of Cabaret that I was in, and nor did I fly. Although there were times I felt like I was flying. But anyway, so that is kind of where this book came from. And at one point I thought that I was going to become a series. I seriously thought about, because in the end, after I finished writing that book, I started looking back at all of the productions that I had done. And every actor will tell you that there are some productions that are more special than others. And I started trying to figure out which ones of those fell into that category. And there were quite a few of them. Like I thought, well, I could do a book along the same lines of when I did a production of Amadeus. I played Mozart, and it was some of the things that happened during that show I can't explain to this day. Especially during the performance. There were moments in that show when I was on stage as Amadeus, as Mozart, and things happened, and I was like, oh, when I walked off stage going, okay, am I high? Because I don't know what just happened. And I thought, I could do that. But then my editor, the publisher, said, it might take away from the strength of that book if you turn it into a series. So I decided it's just going to be a one-off, and they were right. I don't want to take away from the punch that story has. I want that to stand very special, because it is special to me. And I think that very often when fans or other writers ask me which book of mine that I've written is my favorite, I pretty much go to that one immediately. And it's mostly because it's so personal. And there's so much of me in it. And there's me in other books, but that one is really and truly me. Anyway, I don't want to ramble on too long because I know that I have a tendency to do that. I could probably sit and talk about this book for another half an hour, but I know people's attention spans tend to wane, and I don't want to induce yawns, as it were. Anyway, I'm going to come back and do more of these events because a lot of my books have very poignant moments that either inspired me to write them or inspired change within the books, or and I want this series to be about the sort of intersection between fiction and real life from the point of view from the writer, because the truth of the matter is our world around us affects us, and it kind of helps us along in how we write and what we write. Anyway, so look, you can find all of my books on Amazon. You can also go to jackwallen.com, and you can also go to back to YouTube. I have a video series that's called Me and My Muse. It's a series that is dedicated to helping artists work with their craft. Mostly it's about writing, but sometimes I touch on acting. And it's really just a way for especially new writers and intermediate writers to learn some of the tricks that I use to get where I need to go. And if you've read any of my books, it might be interesting for you to find out how the sausage is made. Anyway, thank you so very much for hanging out with me for this brief period of time and listen to me talk about Defying Gravity. Remember, it takes a great deal of time and effort to create these works. So respect writers and actors and directors and musicians and painters and dancers. Art can be hard. And it's especially hard when you feel like the world around you doesn't appreciate it. And I'm not talking about me directly, but artists in general. That is to say that we value your support more than you can possibly imagine. And we also value your friendship, because that means the world to us. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody, and I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.